Part 1. The discovery of the stars. Aurora was always different from the other elves in the forest kingdom of Elora. While her sisters loved to dance under the silver moonlight and sing the old songs of their ancestors, Aurora spent her nights gazing up at the stars. She wondered what lay beyond the clouds, what other worlds existed in the darkness above the ancient trees. Her mother told her that such thoughts were dangerous and that an elf should be content with the beauty of the forest. But Aurora could not stop dreaming. The Elven Council had warned all the young elves that the outside world was full of danger. They said that other creatures from distant places were not to be trusted. They spoke of wars and destruction that happened in lands far away. But Aurora had found old human texts in a forgotten library deep within the forest. She taught herself their language by studying these books in secret. She learned about their cities, their machines, and their endless curiosity about the universe. 3 dragons had chosen Aurora as their guardian when she was just a child. Flame was the oldest and most protective. His scales shimmered like polished rubies in the sunlight. Storm was wild and energetic, always dancing through the clouds with joy. Whisper was the smallest but the wisest, with scales that changed color like the mood of the weather. The 3 dragons had bonded with Aurora in ways that no other dragon had bonded with an elf before. They understood her dreams and shared her desire to explore beyond the forest boundaries. One night, Aurora received signals on an old human device she had repaired with her magic. The signals came from the sky. Ships were approaching Elora, real human ships from a distant planet called Earth. Aurora's heart raced with excitement and fear. This was the moment she had waited for her entire life. But she knew that her people would be afraid. The Elven Council would want to hide or fight these visitors. Aurora had to make a choice that would change everything forever. She climbed to the highest peak of the Crystal Mountains and stood between the sky and the earth. The 3 dragons flew beside her, sensing her emotions. Aurora looked at Flame and saw her own courage reflected in his eyes. She touched Storm's wing and felt his wild energy fill her with strength. She whispered to Whisper and heard his ancient wisdom in her mind. Together, they were ready to meet the humans. The morning when the human ships landed was clear and bright. Aurora stood at the edge of the crystalline cliff with her 3 dragons. She wore clothes that blended elven and human styles, a symbol of the bridge she wanted to build between the 2 worlds. Her silver hair caught the sunlight like threads of pure magic. Her pointed ears moved with every sound from the valley below. The ship doors opened slowly. Aurora watched as figures emerged. They moved carefully as if they were afraid. Some carried devices that glowed with strange lights. Others held their hands up to show they had no weapons. These humans looked nothing like the monsters the Elven Council had described. They looked curious, just like her. They looked like explorers with the same dreams that filled her heart. The first human to step forward was a woman. She had dark skin and kind eyes that searched the landscape. Her name was Violet, and she carried herself like a leader. Behind her came others. There was a man named David who was a scientist with wild hair and friendly smile. There was a woman named Lisa who kept taking pictures with her camera. There was Marcus who seemed nervous but kept moving forward with determination. And there was Sophia, the youngest, who looked at the dragons with pure wonder in her eyes. Aurora took a deep breath and descended the cliff. She moved slowly and gracefully, showing that she meant no harm. The dragons stayed above her, circling protectively but not threateningly. As she got closer, she could see the wonder grow in the humans' eyes. They had never seen an elf before. They had never seen dragons flying free in the sky. For them, this moment was like stepping into a dream. When Aurora reached Violet, she extended her hand in the human greeting. Her fingers were delicate and long, with silver marks that glowed softly. Violet's eyes went wide. She reached out slowly and took Aurora's hand. The touch between the 2 species was electric with possibility and meaning. Aurora spoke in perfect English, her accent musical and clear. She told Violet and her team that she had been waiting for them. She said that she wanted to be the bridge between their 2 peoples. She introduced her dragons and explained that they were not weapons but family. She told them that Elora was a world of magic and wonder, and that she believed humans and elves could learn from each other and become friends. The human team stood in silence for a moment. Then Violet smiled, and her smile was warm and genuine. She said that they had traveled so far across the stars to find new worlds and new possibilities. She said that meeting Aurora and her dragons was more than they had ever hoped for. She asked if Aurora would take them to her world and show them the wonders that lay beyond the landing site. Aurora agreed, and that was how the great adventure began. Flame descended from the sky and lowered his wings so that the humans could climb onto his back. Storm and Whisper did the same. The three dragons rose into the air, carrying the human explorers toward the deep forests of Aelora. As they flew, Aurora pointed out the crystal mountains, the glowing rivers and the ancient trees that had stood for thousands of years. The elven guards watched from the forest edges with shock and confusion. They had never seen humans riding on the backs of dragons. They had never imagined such a thing was possible. Word spread quickly through the kingdom that Aurora had brought visitors from the stars. The Elven Council demanded an explanation, but Aurora was not afraid. She knew that what she had started would change her world forever, and she was ready for that change to begin. Part 2. The Meeting with the Council. The Great Hall of the Elven Council was ancient and beautiful, with walls made of living wood that pulsed with green light. Aurora stood at the center, facing 9 elders who had ruled Aelora for hundreds of years. The 3 dragons waited outside the hall, too large to fit through the doors. Violet and her human team stood beside Aurora, looking nervous but determined. The council members stared at them with a mixture of fear, anger, and confusion. Head elder was a woman named Celestine who had ruled for 300 years. Her eyes were sharp and cold, and her voice carried the weight of ancient authority. She demanded to know how Aurora dared bring strangers into their sacred kingdom without permission from the council. She said that the law of Aelora was clear, and that outsiders were never to be trusted. She said that these humans could be spies or invaders sent to destroy the elven civilization. Aurora stood tall and spoke calmly. She explained that she had studied the humans for many years. She showed them the books and texts she had found. She played them the transmissions she had received from space. She told them about human art, music, science, and philosophy. She explained that humans had the same capacity for kindness and creativity that elves possessed. She said that fear was what stopped progress, not welcome and understanding. Violet stepped forward and began to speak. She told the council about Earth and how humans had learned from their mistakes. She explained that her team had traveled billions of miles to find new worlds and new friends. She said that humans did not want to conquer or destroy. They wanted to learn and grow alongside other intelligent beings. She promised that if the council allowed them to stay, they would share their knowledge and technology. They would help Aelora become even stronger and more beautiful. Some of the council members looked moved by Violet's words, but others were not convinced. An elder named Theron stood up and said that humans were not worthy of trust. He said that they brought machines and technology that would corrupt the natural magic of Aelora. He said that Aurora was foolish and that she had betrayed the kingdom by bringing these outsiders to their home. His words were harsh and angry, and many elves who watched from the sides of the hall murmured in agreement. Aurora felt doubt creep into her heart for the first time. She wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. She thought about how the rest of her kind viewed her. To them, she was already strange for studying human languages and dreaming of the stars. Now she was asking them to accept humans into their society, and they were not ready for that change. But then something unexpected happened. The 3 dragons burst through the walls of the council hall. The wood bent and moved like water under their massive bodies. Flame, Storm, and Whisper entered the sacred chamber, their presence commanding and powerful. The elders fell back in fear and shock. Dragons had not entered this hall for 1,000 years. Flame approached the council members and bowed his head. It was a gesture of respect and submission. Storm danced in circles around Violet, showing that he accepted her as a friend. Whisper walked directly to Aurora and placed her head on the elf woman's shoulder. The gesture was so clear that even the most stubborn council member understood its meaning. The dragons trusted these humans. The dragons believed in Aurora's vision. The sight of the 3 dragons showing respect and protection toward the human visitors changed the atmosphere in the hall. Dragons were sacred to the elves. They were symbols of wisdom and power. If the dragons accepted the humans, then perhaps the council should consider it too. The younger elves who watched began to smile and whisper with excitement. Elder Celestine stood and spoke words that surprised everyone. She said that while she was still cautious, she would allow a trial period. The humans could stay in Aelora for one full season. During that time, both species would work together and share knowledge. At the end of the season, the council would meet again and decide if the humans could stay permanently. She warned Aurora that if anything went wrong, she would take full responsibility for her actions. Aurora felt tears of relief and gratitude form in her eyes. She bowed deeply to Celestine and thanked the council for giving peace a chance. Violet did the same, showing respect for the elven customs. The dragons rumbled with approval, a sound like distant thunder that echoed through the hall. Over the next few days, Aurora helped Violet and her team settle into a beautiful part of the forest. The humans were given a village of crystal structures that had been abandoned for centuries. Aurora's dragons worked alongside human workers to repair the buildings and make them comfortable. The humans brought amazing technology from their ships. They created electric lights and water systems that amazed the elves who had only known natural magic. David, the human scientist, became fascinated with the magical crystals that grew throughout Aelora. He spent hours studying them with tools and devices that made him look like a wizard. Lisa, the photographer, captured beautiful images of the forest and the dragons that made even the skeptical elves feel wonder at their own home. Marcus began teaching humans and elves about architecture, combining both styles to create something new and beautiful. Young Sophia quickly became friends with all the young elves and dragons, her laughter and joy spreading through the forest like sunshine. But Violet spent most of her time with Aurora. The two women explored the deep forests together, discovering hidden waterfalls and ancient ruins. They talked late into the nights about their dreams and hopes. Violet told Aurora about Earth and the blue oceans and vast skies. Aurora told Violet about the history of the elves and the magic that had shaped their world for millennia. With each passing day, their connection grew stronger and deeper. By the end of the first month, the village was thriving. Humans and elves worked together in fields and workshops. They shared meals and music and stories. They were learning that despite their differences, they had more in common than either species had ever imagined. The dragons flew above them all, symbols of unity and the beautiful possibilities that came when two worlds decided to become one. Part 3. The challenge from the shadows. As the season progressed, not everyone in Aelora welcomed the humans with open arms. There was a faction of elves who believed that Aurora had betrayed their kind. They met secretly in dark caves beneath the forest, plotting against the growing friendship between the two species. The leader of this faction was a warrior named Kale, who had once been friends with Aurora before she began her studies of the human world. Kale believed that the humans would eventually destroy Aelora. He said they would take the magical crystals and use them for weapons. He said they would cut down the ancient forests and build machines and cities everywhere. He gathered followers who shared his fear and anger. Together, they planned to sabotage the human settlement and force the council to send the visitors back to their world. One night, a group of Kale's followers set fire to one of the human storage buildings. They wanted to make it look like an accident, but the fire spread quickly toward the main structures where humans and elves were sleeping. The alarm was raised and chaos erupted throughout the village. People ran in all directions, trying to escape the flames. Children cried out in fear. The night that had been so peaceful became a nightmare. Aurora was sleeping when Flame burst into her room and pulled her up with urgent movements. The dragon had sensed the danger before anyone else. By the time Aurora reached the outside, the fire was spreading rapidly. She could see humans and elves trapped in buildings, unable to escape. She saw David trying to rescue Lisa from a collapsing structure. She saw young Sophia separated from the other children, crying and lost in the smoke. Without hesitation, Aurora called out to her dragons. Flame used his massive wings to smother the flames on one side of the village. Storm flew through the thick smoke and rescued people who were trapped, lifting them to safety. Whisper used her magical abilities to create a barrier of cool air that slowed the fire's advance. But the fire was too strong and there was not enough time to save everything. Violet appeared through the smoke, coordinating the rescue efforts with amazing courage and clear thinking. She worked alongside Aurora, directing elves and humans to create a chain to pass water and supplies. She carried injured people to safety and comforted those who were frightened. As she worked next to Aurora, their hands touched several times, and in those moments neither woman thought about the danger. They thought only about saving lives. After hours of desperate work, the fire was finally controlled. Several buildings were destroyed, but no one had died. Thanks to Aurora's dragons and Violet's leadership, everyone was safe. But the settlement was damaged and many people were injured. The village looked like a war zone. The next morning, the council demanded answers about what caused the fire. Aurora suspected it was deliberate sabotage, but she had no proof. Violet suggested they analyze the burned structures to see if they could find evidence of how the fire started. David used his scientific tools to examine the ashes and discovered marks that showed someone had deliberately placed materials to start the fire in multiple locations. It was definitely not an accident. Elder Celestine ordered an investigation. She questioned every elf in the kingdom about their whereabouts during the fire. After days of searching, the council discovered that Kale and his followers were responsible. They had believed they were protecting Aelora from human invaders. They said they were acting out of love for their homeland and fear for their people's safety. Aurora was devastated to learn that her former friend had betrayed her trust. She felt pain that was deeper than any physical wound. She understood Kale's fears because they were the same fears that had troubled her own family. She understood that he acted from a place of love for his people, even though his actions were wrong. Violet went to see Kale in the holding chamber where the elves had placed him. She spoke to him about Earth's history and how humans had overcome fear and prejudice. She told him about wars that had almost destroyed her people before they learned to seek peace and understanding. She said that what Aurora was trying to do was offer a path away from fear and toward hope. She asked him to consider that humans might not be the enemy he feared. Kale listened to Violet's words, and something shifted inside him. He saw that this human woman was not a monster or an invader. She was someone who cared genuinely about making peace work. When Elder Celestine came to pronounce judgment, Kale asked for mercy. He said he had been wrong and that he wanted to help rebuild what had been destroyed. He asked if he could work alongside the humans to prove that elves could change and grow. The council agreed to give Kale a second chance, but only if he worked directly with the human team and Aurora to repair the damaged village. This choice was difficult for many elves to accept, but it showed that reconciliation was possible even in the darkest moments. Over the following weeks, Kale worked alongside Aurora, Violet, David, Lisa, Marcus, and Sophia. Slowly, the village was rebuilt, but this time the new buildings were designed together, combining the best ideas from both human and elven architecture. The work was hard, but as they labored side by side, something changed in Kale's heart. He began to see humans not as invaders, but as people just like himself. He began to laugh with them, eat with them, and eventually he became one of Aurora's trusted friends. The dragons watched all of this unfold. They saw how quickly fear could turn to violence, but they also saw how courage and compassion could heal even the deepest wounds. Flame grew closer to David, often letting the human scientist ride on his back while he explored the forest. Storm became best friends with Sophia, playing games and racing through the sky. Whisper spent long hours with Kale, teaching him that trust could exist between former enemies. When the season of trial came to an end, Aurora stood before the council once again. This time she was not alone. She stood with Violet at her side and with humans and elves standing together behind her. She stood with her 3 dragons circling above her. She stood ready to ask the council for permission to let the humans stay forever, and to begin building a new society where both species could thrive as one. HFY 4. The growing bond as the seasons turned and changed. Aurora and Violet's connection deepened in ways neither had expected. They spent their days exploring the vast forests of Aelora, discovering hidden temples and ancient ruins that told stories of elven history. Violet asked countless questions about the magic that flowed through the land, and Aurora taught her the old songs that could make flowers bloom and streams flow faster. Violet learned to ride the dragons almost as skillfully as Aurora could. She would hold tight to Flame's neck as they soared through clouds that glowed with strange colors at sunset. She would laugh with pure joy as Storm performed acrobatic maneuvers in the sky, diving and spinning with incredible grace. She would sit quietly with Whisper, feeling the dragon's calm wisdom flow into her mind through invisible connections that transcended language. The 3 dragons seemed to understand the special relationship growing between the elf and human woman. They would arrange their evening resting places so that Aurora and Violet could sit together between them, wrapped in warmth and safety. Flame would hum a low sound that vibrated through the earth and seemed to carry the rhythm of the women's heartbeats. Storm would fall asleep with his massive head resting near them, his breathing synchronized with theirs. Whisper would sometimes create beautiful patterns of colored light above them, paintings made from pure magic that danced across the night sky. One evening, as they sat together watching the twin moons rise over the crystal mountains, Violet took Aurora's hand and held it gently. She said that in all her travels across the stars, she had never imagined finding a place or a person that felt like home. She said that Aurora had changed her understanding of what was possible in the universe. She said that she did not want to leave Elora. She did not want to return to Earth. She wanted to stay here forever, building a new future together. Aurora felt tears slide down her face, but they were tears of happiness. She told Violet that she had spent her whole life feeling like she did not belong in her own world, because she dreamed too much of things beyond the forest. She said that Violet had given her permission to pursue those dreams. She said that together, they could create something beautiful that had never existed before. She said that she loved Violet more than anything in the world. The news that Aurora and Violet wanted to be life partners spread quickly through both the human and elven communities. Reactions were mixed. Some elves were shocked that Aurora would choose to bind herself to a human. Some humans were surprised that Violet would give up her connection to Earth to stay in this alien world. But the younger members of both species were thrilled. They saw Aurora and Violet as pioneers of a new kind of love and a new kind of future. David and Lisa worked together to create a beautiful ceremony that honored both human and elven traditions. David designed decorative structures that combined technological lights with living crystal formations. Lisa photographed every moment, capturing the joy and significance of what was about to happen. Marcus worked with elven builders to create a gathering place where thousands of people could witness the ceremony. Sophia and her elf friends spent days making garlands from flowers that bloomed only once every 100 years. Kyle, who had become a true friend to both women, asked to have the honor of speaking at the ceremony. He stood before the crowd and spoke about fear and how it had nearly destroyed everything. He spoke about how Aurora had shown courage by choosing understanding over safety. He spoke about how Violet had shown kindness by seeking to heal wounds rather than take revenge. He said that their love was proof that the bond between their two species could be real and strong and beautiful. Elder Celestine presided over the ceremony, and even she seemed moved by the words of love and commitment that Aurora and Violet exchanged. The three dragons descended from the sky and formed a circle around the couple, their presence blessing and protecting the union. Flame extended his wing and sheltered them from a sudden rain, keeping them dry as if the sky itself wanted to celebrate their love. After the ceremony, celebrations lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. Humans and elves danced together, their bodies moving to music that blended human instruments with the natural sounds of Elora. They shared food that combined the best recipes from both worlds. They told stories and sang songs and laughed until their sides hurt. Even the dragons participated, performing graceful dances through the air that drew cheers and applause from everyone who watched. But the most important moment for Aurora came when she stood alone with Violet on the same crystalline cliff where she had first descended to meet the humans. The sun was setting and the sky was painted in shades of gold and purple and rose. The 3 dragons rested nearby, content and peaceful. Violet put her arms around Aurora's shoulders, and the elf woman leaned into the warmth and comfort of her partner's embrace. Aurora told Violet that she had been afraid for so long that she was wrong to dream of the stars. She had feared that her desire to know the world beyond Elora made her a traitor to her own kind. She had questioned whether she was brave or foolish. But now she understood that sometimes the most important discoveries in life came from being willing to take risks and follow your heart even when others did not understand. Violet held Aurora tighter and said that she had given up everything she knew to stay in this world. Her family on Earth might never understand her choice. She might never see the blue oceans of her birth world again, but she said that she would make that sacrifice 1,000 times over, because she had found her true home and her true love in Elora. She said that the real treasure she had traveled across the stars to find was standing right there in her arms. The 3 dragons seemed to sense the significance of this moment. They rose into the air and performed one final dance, their scales catching the light of the setting sun and reflecting it back like living jewels. They spiraled and twisted through the air, creating patterns of movement that were so beautiful that both women wept. The dragons had shown them that even beings who seemed so different on the surface could understand each other deeply and protect each other with devotion. As night fell and stars began to appear in the sky, Aurora realized that every choice she had made led to this moment. Every secret study of human languages had been necessary. Every brave conversation with the council had been worth the fear. Every challenge they had overcome together had strengthened their bond. She was exactly where she was meant to be, and she was exactly who she was meant to be, standing under the stars with Violet and their 3 beloved dragons as her witnesses to the most perfect happiness. Part 5. The new world begins. 10 years had passed since Violet's ship first landed on Elora. The world had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. The small village where the humans had first settled had grown into a thriving city that stretched across 3 valleys. Humans and elves lived side by side in neighborhoods where their architectures blended seamlessly. Crystal towers stood next to steel buildings, and gardens of magical flowers surrounded structures powered by human technology. Aurora and Violet had built a magnificent sanctuary on the highest peak of the Crystal Mountains. It was a place where leaders from both species could meet and discuss the future of their shared world. The walls were made from living crystal that glowed with soft light at night. The roofs were designed to look like dragon wings, honoring the 3 beings who had made everything possible. The sanctuary had become famous across the galaxy. News of the peace between humans and elves had spread through space, carried by the transmissions that Aurora and Violet sent into the stars. Other species had begun to arrive, curious about this place where different worlds had learned to live together. They came to study the mixed communities and to understand how fear had been transformed into friendship. David had become the head scientist of a research center that explored the nature of the magical crystals. He worked alongside elven scholars, and together they had discovered that the crystals could be used to create clean energy that would not harm the environment. This technology was so revolutionary that other planets were requesting permission to implement it in their own worlds. David often said that if Aurora had not brought Violet to Elora, none of these discoveries would have been possible because human science and elven magic had needed each other to truly flourish. Lisa's photographs had been displayed in galleries across multiple worlds. She had created a beautiful book called The Bridge Between Stars that showed images of the early days of human and elven cooperation. The book had won many awards, and Lisa had been invited to speak at universities and cultural centers everywhere. She often told the story of how Aurora had changed her understanding of what was truly important in life. Marcus had designed more than 50 buildings throughout Elora that combined human and elven styles in stunning new ways. His work had inspired a whole movement of mixed-species architecture that was being adopted on other worlds. Young architects from many different species came to Elora to study under his guidance and learn the principles of harmony and balance. Sophia, who was now a young woman, had become an ambassador between humans and elves. She had learned both languages fluently and had become one of the most respected voices in the government. She represented a new generation of people who had been born into the friendship between species and could not imagine a world where such cooperation did not exist. Kale had become a teacher, helping both humans and elves understand each other's history and culture. He taught classes about how prejudice could be overcome and how old enemies could become allies. His students were amazed by his story of redemption and transformation. He often spoke about how meeting Violet had changed his life and taught him that understanding was stronger than fear. But the 3 dragons remained the true heart of everything that had been accomplished. Flame had become so large that it took 10 full-grown men to measure the length of his wings. He was wise and kind, and young dragons from other parts of Elora would come to learn from him. Storm had become famous for his incredible flying abilities and had established aerial routes that connected different parts of the world. He had even trained younger dragons to serve as messengers and transportation between distant lands. Whisper had become a healer, her magic able to cure diseases that had plagued both humans and elves for centuries. Her sanctuary had treated thousands of patients, and her reputation as a miracle worker had spread across the galaxies. On the 10th anniversary of the first human landing, Aurora and Violet decided to host a massive celebration. People from every nation and every species came to Elora to participate, The 3 valleys filled with visitors and temporary cities were built to house everyone. It was the largest gathering of different species that the galaxy had ever witnessed. The celebration lasted for an entire week. There were performances of dance and music that blended human instruments with elven magic. There were competitions and games where humans and elves worked together in teams. There were feasts where traditional human food was served alongside ancient elven delicacies. There were speeches and ceremonies honoring those who had worked to build the peace. On the final night of celebration, Aurora and Violet stood together on the crystalline cliff where their journey had begun. The 3 dragons rested beside them, their scales glowing with peaceful light. Below them, the valleys were illuminated with thousands of tiny lights as people gathered for the final ceremony. Aurora looked out at the world they had created together. She saw humans and elves living as equals and partners. She saw young children of both species playing together without fear or prejudice. She saw scientists and artists and teachers working together to advance knowledge and beauty. She saw a future that was so different from the world she had known as a child. A world where the greatest dreams could become real if you were brave enough to believe in them. Violet took Aurora's hand and squeezed it gently. She told Aurora that when her ship first landed on Aelora, she had been searching for new worlds to explore and new knowledge to discover. But she had found something far more valuable than either of those things. She had found a home and a partner, and a purpose that gave her life meaning beyond anything she had ever experienced. She said that it was Aurora's courage and vision that had made all of this possible. Aurora turned to Violet and smiled with joy that was so pure and genuine that it seemed to light up the darkness around them. She said that they had been given a rare gift. They had been given the opportunity to show the universe that 2 different species could not only coexist, but could create something beautiful and new together. She said that their love was not just their own. It was a symbol of what was possible when people chose understanding over fear and acceptance over prejudice. The 3 dragons rose into the air and performed their most magnificent dance yet. They spiraled and twisted through the night sky, their movements creating patterns that seemed to paint the very stars. They sang a song that human ears had never heard before, a harmony that was so beautiful that everyone in the valleys below fell silent and listened with tears on their faces. As the dragons danced and sang, Aurora and Violet held each other close. They knew that their journey was not over. There would be new challenges and new obstacles. There would be times when doubt and fear tried to return. But they also knew that they would face those challenges together, supported by the 3 dragons and by the community they had built. The future of Aelora was bright and full of promise. The elf woman and her 3 dragons had found a human partner who loved them, and understood them and believed in the vision of a world where all species could thrive together. And from that moment forward, the story of Aurora and Violet became a legend that was told and retold across the galaxies, inspiring other species to seek peace and understanding instead of war and conquest. They had not just changed their own world. They had shown the universe what was truly possible when 2 hearts decided to build a bridge instead of a wall.